Hey, I hope you guys are having a great weekend. Today's lesson is on solving absolute value inequalities. So if you'll take a look here, we have the absolute value of x is less than 2. So what we want to do here is we want to set up two inequalities. The first inequality is going to be x is less than 2. And the other inequality is going to be x is greater than negative 2. So notice I switched the inequality from less than to greater than, and I changed the sign of the number. Emmett. One of my students is visiting, so I'm going to pause right now. Yeah, if only I had more students like Emmett. He turns in his work on time. All right, here we go, back to our answer. So now to graph this answer, we're going to draw a number line. And so we're going to put an open dot at 2 because there's no equal sign. And we're going to put an open dot at negative 2. Remember, open dot if there's no equal part. So now we're going to do some shading. So for this first answer here, it says x is less than 2. So we would shade to the left. And here x is greater than negative 2. So from negative 2 we shade to the right. So the solutions to this inequality are going to be all numbers between negative 2 and positive 2. Okay, let's take a look at another example. The absolute value of x is greater than 2. Same concept. We're going to set up two inequalities. One, x is greater than 2, and x is less than negative 2. Graphing this answer, we're going to again put an open dot at 2 and an open dot at negative 2. And now let's determine where to shade. So all values greater than 2. So we're going to shade to the right. All values less than negative 2. So here we're going to shade to the left. Okay, so now that we got the basic concept down, let's take a look at a more complex inequality. So here we have 2 times the absolute value of 6x minus 2 plus 4 is less than 22. So before I can write my two inequalities, I first have to get the inequality by itself, which means I'm going to have to cancel out the 4 and the 2. So undoing adding and subtracting first. Okay, then undoing multiplication. And now we're ready to break this into two inequalities. Just like when we're solving equations, once we get the absolute value by itself, then we can break it into two equations. So our first inequality, 6x minus 2 is less than 9. And then on the second inequality, the inequality changes and the number changes to negative. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and solve. So adding 2 on both sides. So 6x is less than 11. Dividing by 6. X is less than 11/6. Solving the other inequality. Okay, now to graph our solutions. So we have a positive number and we have a negative number. So to graph this, you may want to change these numbers to decimals. Okay, so I converted them to decimals. Now notice I used an approximation symbol because these both turned out to be repeating decimals. So I went ahead and rounded to the nearest tenth. So we need a dot at 1.8. So that's going to be approximately right in here between 1 and 2. That's 11/6. And we're going to have a dot at negative 1.7. About right in here. That'd be a negative 7/6. Now for the shading. So here we're going to shade less than 1.8. So that would be to the left. And here we're going to shade greater than negative 1.7. So that would be to the right. So these are our two answers. And this is the graph that represents those two answers. Okay, let's take a look at this one quickly. So again, we have some numbers that we need to undo or cancel. So of course, we're going to start by undoing adding. Then we're going to undo multiplying. And then we're going to go ahead and break this into two inequalities. So the first inequality, we use greater than or equal to 1. And the second inequality, we switch the inequality, keep the equal sign, and change the sign of the number. And now we solve for x. So one solution, x is greater than or equal to 2. The other solution, x is less than or equal to 0. Now, to graph our solutions, we draw a number line. So we're going to have a closed dot at 0, and we're going to have a closed dot at 2. So which way do we shade? Well, for the 0, it says that x is less than 0. So less than 0 is going to be to the left. The other solution, x is greater than 2, so greater than 2 is to the right. Okay, so I think you got the idea. Hope you're having a good weekend. I'll see you all next week.